When Ted and Sean asked me to do this show, I kind of wondered why, because it's a big deal. It's a big deal to fill a house like this. And they have spent so much time, and I had admired them buying this house and stopped in to check whenever I could, because they did maximum work on tearing out rugs and all kinds of stuff. So I did agree, and to be honest, my house looks secondary to this now. And I'm really excited to have it all here. But it also made me think of all the art that I've done in the past that isn't here over the years. And I felt pretty excited about it, because there was no art in kindergarten through 12th grade in my school. And that's why I think it's so important to have the arts an integral part of learning, because my mom and dad were very creative. We did a lot of, this is kind of deviating, we did an awfully lot of trout fishing. And my dad would teach me about all the wildflowers, and you can recognize that my art has an element of nature in it. And it's very important, but it's not exactly what I see, it's what I see inside of what I see. And I don't know if you understand that part, but we had a bioscope when I taught in Milton, I guess. No, Monroe, I think. I don't know. Anyway, a bioscope lets you put slides under it and focus it on the wall. And I would have my students look at all these slides, and then when they were done looking, I would have them create something that was similar to a structure they saw, not a copy, but had the essence of it. Plus, as long as I'm thinking of it, I love the chaos book that's somewhere here, that's mine, because I bought, see, now I'm gonna struggle for all these names, but I bought things that go on and on and on forever, designs that go on and on, were really interesting to me. And I think that, you know, if people stop and look, but then besides look, think, all of a sudden they see similarities in many other things. So it isn't that they just see that particular structure in one, they might see it in another one. Well then, as an artist, I can continue to create my own. So it's really, really important to me, to having been a teacher, art teacher for 30 years, kindergarten through adults. It's really important to me to instill to everybody that's an artist or that wants to do some painting or whatever they want to do, to not always depend on finding a way to make a finished product that's probably mostly someone else's. Because I'm very firm in feeling that every one of us, to some degree, have an ability to bring out whatever it is we have. And in my case, a lot of it has to do with how I look at things and how I think. All of mine have titles that relate to you, something about my thoughts. But what I thought I would do, because Sean asked me to do this, or Ted, is this is a piece I just started. And my son Scott is going to help me out on this one, because I want some divers, and he's a diver. And I don't want to make it look like it's just somebody swimming. But the idea of my work lately, and I think I need to explain this, because when I first started doing art. It was oil, well, it was casein on my first painting back there. But then as I continued to work, it was oil. A lot of these are still oils. And then since the advent of alcohol inks and gel pens and all kinds of new things, and the fact that I have a harder time standing up till 2 o'clock in the morning to create something many nights, I came up with the idea of using collage in my work. Because with collage, you can let it be, and then I go downstairs and I work an hour or maybe 2 if I'm lucky, and put pieces down. I don't always glue them down, because then I go down the next day and look at it and think, do I really want to glue it or not? And so the first time I ever did a little collage was I was taking watercolor classes at Whitewater towards my master's, and I hadn't done a lot of watercolor. And I knew from showing at Beloit College's invitational show that they pretty much expected watercolor to have white areas back then. I don't know if that's changed or not, but when I was doing watercolors, I would find that most of it was okay, but then I'd think, but this doesn't sparkle like it should. So that's when I started adding little tiny pieces of collage, very, very minimal. And this when I was living in Janesville, I did a number of collage pieces, but that was before alcohol inks. And what I like is that the alcohol, and I love painting on these boards. I like the aqua boards the best because you can scratch through, you can do all kinds of, and they seem to pop the inks a lot better. But what I like is with alcohol inks, you can actually take rubbing alcohol and you can wipe out an area. Okay, then you get to the gel pen, same thing. If all of a sudden you don't like that area, which I don't wipe out things very often, but if I don't like an area, I can wipe it out. That's different than oils or even acrylics. So this is a piece that's in progress. And what's my idea here? My idea is kind of strange, which many are. It's called What You Don't See Below the Sea. Now I try to figure that out. But my son Scott is a diver, and wherever they go, he dives. And I decided in this piece, and the reason this is empty in these places is I asked him to teach me how a diver's paraphernalia looks, so I don't get it wrong. So I think he's doing a sketch. I don't know if he's going to collaborate on this or not. But I have a lot to do yet. The first process I do is put the inks down. And I don't use a hair dryer. I just put them down, and if I want it's thinner, I use the spray alcohol. And then when you spray on it with alcohol, you get all kinds of good little dots, textured areas. And the one behind Cooper is one that Cooper and I did together. And those dots that he put on are different from these dots, but they're all important. And then I start laying things down because I wanted to bring this. This is one of about 20 boxes of collage pieces I have. Now, if, for example, maybe I don't feel like going downstairs, but I have some magazines to look at, I sit on the couch, and all these things that are in the kitchen get filled up. And I have boxes and boxes as some of you know. This is one of my blue boxes. This is my postage stamp that I love to use. It's the, what is it? Congratulations or something. And those little pieces are really hard to glue down. And then I love Aborigine art. So I have some pieces of that. This is a piece that somebody gave me. People give me things like, I don't think Eileen is still here. Is she here? No. But Eileen's very good at giving me some of her little pieces, so there are always some of those in my collages. This is the kind of thing I cut things pretty. This is one of my cards that Karen has, the original, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is a card, and I cut that up and used parts of that. And I pick things off the floor, like it's a crumb, a paper crumb. This is something that I see possibilities, not using it like it is, but look at all those lines. And anything with color, will be in one of my boxes. And some are very small. Some are smaller than that, because when something is this tiny, you can make it actually, after it's got glue on it, you can actually turn it any way you want it to go. So when you cut it really small, and a lot of my pieces have very small stuff in, so it takes forever to glue it. And someone said, well, what do you glue with? I said, your finger. So I get a glue callus on my finger. But this was something a friend gave me that did, or what do you call it when they put the paint down, let it run. So she gave me this, and I had, in this piece, Frank gave me those colored pieces at the top, and they were laying on my table, and I kept looking at them, and I thought, I want to have those at the top. And then I had to get Ted to make a special, because Ted does all my framing. And so he made the box. And then when I started this, I knew I wanted a red line coming down. And I thought I wanted just the primary colors. But then, and this was a tracing from, I sometimes trace my plant shadows by my window because they're so gorgeous. And this was a tracing from there, and I decided to use it. And then I started to use red, yellow, and blue, and it didn't work at all because it didn't zap until I put the secondary colors in. And then I had all this open, and I thought, you're kind of stupid. Now you gotta figure out if you're gonna paint it or what. And I decided to scribble, and it worked. So, but the pieces in back of me are not the collage. And my collage pieces are actually a change in my art, partly to accommodate the fact that I don't have the physical strength to always do what I've done in the past. Plus, it's a challenge. And like I said, I spent out on this one that's from the COVID in there. That took hours. This will take, I've spent a lot of hours on this. Nobody knows that because it doesn't look that complicated, I guess. And Cooper uses hours and hours on his pieces too. But basically, I want my pieces to reflect the joy that's around us, that everybody takes time to see, but it's also important for me to create a feeling that I want to get across. And right back a pat there by Frank, that one's called
This one?
self-actualization. And actually there's a couple little strips that I think Frank gave me in that one too. And I think that's one that was at Two Fish, wasn't it, Patrick? And that's a really special piece for me, because I don't know if you all know the hierarchy of, I'm sorry, I'm skipping around here, of, you know, you have to fulfill your needs, your food, your shelter and all that. And then you get up to having time to do what you really are looking forward to doing. In our cases, it's art. In another case, it might be opera, singing, or well, art is photography, so I can't get by with that. But the self-actualization idea is really important to me. And I taught art for 30 years. And when I taught, well, first we were art supervisors and consultants, but when I taught, we worked with teachers. And one of the challenges was to get them through with mimeographs coloring sheets for kids when they got their work done. And we would work really hard at telling them, we'd rather have you give you a piece of empty paper and let them do whatever they wanted, you know. But I had some very wonderful, unique experiences in Janesville. Well, I started in Milton for 2 years, kindergarten through 12th. And then I went to Monroe for a year, taught middle and high school and adults. And then I was going to go home for vacation, Easter vacation. And I had a application for Janesville. And at that time I was living in an $8 room a week, which I had also lived in Milton in an $8 room a week. Back then the men got a little bit more because they had families, which I thought was okay at the time. But minimal, you know, minimal money coming in, minimal luxuries, working hard because it was a lot of classes. But when I did teach, no matter what level, whether it was adults or elementary or middle or whatever, and college for kids too, in Janesville I was really, really lucky because they had, well, first of all, they had a superintendent that recognized the arts were important, and I'm talking about 30 years ago. And Dr. Shanks was the director of education, and he kept drumming into the art, music, and Phi Ed, because Phi Ed was considered one of our 3 groups, and it wasn't a sports thing, it was more important for their development. So we had a really good core group, and Dr. Shanks would keep telling us, remember how important your areas are, and make sure that you know we're behind you. And we had another lady, Margaret Chenoweth. She was up in ages, but she had developed this unique program, which when you hear it, you're gonna think, oh yeah. She was elementary supervisor. And we went around to all the schools, and as time went by, there were more art people hired, but at that time we were consultants and we worked directly with the teachers. And they had to be in the classroom when we taught, and then carry out the lesson and do another lesson we projected. And Margaret Chenoweth said that the best type of learning was when it involved the arts. And so when we went in to do a section with well, I'll use a 5th grade group, for example. I was teaching them about Guernica, which seems like a pretty heavy thing to teach at 5th grade level. But we ended up doing a mural that would have been from there to here using value. So part of the lesson was about Guernica. Part of it was about value. And then once I got it going, the teacher continued it. And it was awesome because they were studying dairy. So it was all the things involved in dairy, you know, the cattle, the barns, the silos and everything, all cut into, you know, more stylized forms. And then there were so many murals because we used to be able to teach at the holidays about, we called it the first Christmas. And then that changed. Music could still sing those songs, but we couldn't use that subject matter. And during that time, some of the murals were there was one mural that a 4th grade teacher carried out. And you'll think it sounds stupid, but it was, I can't remember exactly what I was teaching at the time, but it was all done in hard coloring. It was the most beautiful piece you ever saw because it was huge. And and then there were some times too where we go to the outdoor lab and do things there.
I feel like I have license because I'm your son to interrupt. That's the only reason. I was gonna say, did you want to offer some people a chance to ask questions?
Oh yeah.
Maybe just 2 or 3?
I mean, I have a whole lifeline, so.
I've got one, Kay. When was the Guernica, what time frame was it that you introduced that to the children?
5th grade.
But I mean, what year-ish?
Oh gee. It's been a while.
I'm gonna guess early 80s.
No, it was earlier.
Earlier than that? Okay.
Yeah, it was earlier.
Stand corrected.
And then there was, I can't answer that.
Okay. Well, it was just interesting to me, you know, like what was going on in the world for a 5th grader at that time that they would get such a, you know.
Well,
But I guess it doesn't matter.
I have to tell you this too, that I taught a lot about the different cultures, and Peg isn't here, but when SBA did the Final Friday and the exhibit on different cultures, that got me going in a whole new line too.
Uh-huh.
And I really, really like the Aborigine. And so and you know, you see this, you see the Aborigine things, and it all kind of meshes together. But I think that different cultures have an awfully lot to give us. And as far as Guernica went, there were many, many things we did that probably wouldn't have been done, but they were received well, and the main objective was to teach about the values.
When you say values, do you mean mathematical values or do you mean moral, ethical values?
No, I mean darks and lights.
I see, okay.
And I just I brought this, okay, in case you want to know. This is the glue I use, and the only glue I use. I like it. These, and it took me a long time to discover what kind of glue I wanted to use. And I know there are other glues, and then Cooper can address this to help me a little bit, because he sold me a lot of these. But we came into an advent where supplies changed what we do. And these are all different kinds of pens. I like these because they're fine. They're all water soluble. Mine are. Are all the ones you use water soluble, Cooper?
Some of the gel pens are waterproof.
Yeah, well, I like these because once again, if if I do some lines and I'm doing them in a rhythm and I don't like them, I just take a wet paper towel and I wash them away.
What's the base? What are you, just paper?
No, that's on my board here.
And
I use these on everything I do. If you look at some of my earlier ones, there was nothing on there because the pens I hadn't discovered yet. But then these are all the alcohol inks. And they're very bright. And sometimes they're a little bit too bright. I have one piece I'm working on that I'm gonna have to tone down. And that's gonna be by adding a lot of collage to it. And this piece is on a board that I don't usually use because someone gave it to me. But I'm trying to get it done.
Can you hold it up like this? Like
I was
that?
gonna say, if
That's
there's
great.
anybody who wants to sit on the steps too, you can see really well if you're feeling like you
Well,
need to sit down.
Okay, so what I started with was the alcohol inks, and this has less color than most. And then it has all these little tiny dots because that's an alcohol ink property. And then here, I've started working with the dots to bring them out more. And this is where I've glued on little parts from that postage stamp I like, which takes a long time. And there's some Aboriginal things here. And then there are just thin lines, and I started to work in with a little marker because I want to brighten it up. But I'm going to be waiting for Scott's input on the divers because I don't want to get them wrong. They don't have to be realistic, but they have to be sort of right. And sometimes, at first it was hard because the whole thing looked terrible. It just was blue and it didn't really do anything. And then I started thinking about, I knew I wanted it to be water. And so I started thinking about up here and then placing things down but not gluing them down necessarily, and trying to make sense out of what I was going to do. So I haven't worked over this way much because I still want to work in these areas, but I do like some of the things. I want to bring more of this over here, and I'll leave this so you can see it, but I'd rather have you look at the ones that are done that are complicated because I just like the combination of the alcohol inks, the markers, and the very minute collage. It isn't that I hate the other paintings I ever did, but this was, you know, having some health issues with endurance. This was a way I could continue to do my art and feel proud of it. And I can take as long as I want because I'm not going back in here with paint. And so you should see my basement and my boxes of collage. And at night, if I'm looking through something and I see a page, I tear it out and then I start clipping and they go into one. Look at here. This is all just small pieces clipped at a rate where I can use them straight or I can bend them. And so I find collage really exciting. And the other thing I find exciting is that as I'm getting older and new things are coming out, it's challenging. So I don't have to go back to oil painting or watercolor or acrylics or whatever I was using. You know, I can. Yeah. I didn't hear what he said, but yeah.
The sculptures you were doing that.
Oh yeah. So when I was at Viterbo for 4 years getting my teaching degree in art, that was in lacrosse, and for my show, or from the end of my art ed show, I did a statue about this high, and it was a seated Madonna, and it was all out of clay, and the Christ child was loose, so you could take it out at Christmas and it would look empty. And my instructor, the nun that was teaching that class, didn't even know how to do what we were doing. So we had to make, and this will be interesting, lead bars with certain hardener in it, and of course it was lead. But I did the clay, and I think there are pictures in the bathroom. And then we had to put shims in it all over, and put plaster on it, and pull it off in pieces, and drip these with a torch, the metal bars into all the forms, and then weld them back together. So I think that's probably still at Viterbo somewhere. I don't know where, but so I have had a lot of really good experiences, and I'm a curious person. So, and Scott said, do you want to ask any questions? And here I am yakking.
I have another question. Since you're working with collage and images that are not necessarily created by you,
Yeah.
how do you feel about galleries not letting people have these things exhibited because they're not your images?
Well, I think the end image is mine.
I totally
And
agree, because I like to work in collage.
Yeah.
And yet, if I want to have something in a gallery, like
Well-
in a juried exhibition.
Is Karen
They say
still
no.
here?
Well, no, I mean,
Karen-
two fish is a whole nother thing. I'm
No,
talking about-
but I do love Karen's houses. And I did ask her if I could use one in one of my pieces, which happened to be a two-fish gallery and sold to someone in somewhere. And I think you told me I could do it.
Oh.
It was agreement, and there's a couple levels of copyright agreements, if you're familiar with. So, but it has crept up recently, like you had said, where they had, had some restrictions, so it's kind of a new thing.
Now, if I was
Is it
taking,
is it sampling in a sense?
In a
Cooper maybe?
sense, I would
Cooper
say.
even maybe, like a funky drummer, you know, I mean, he's been in, Clyde Stubblefield, he's been in more
He's been
songs
sampled
than,
by everybody.
he's
Yeah.
been sampled, but he never got credit for it.
Yeah, I took a copyright class for that years ago at Recording Technology School, and they talked about, like, I mean, depending on who owns the recording versus who wrote the material versus
Right.
all that, yeah.
I would feel differently if I was taking a picture of a duck totally and cutting all these things out, and they were by an artist and it was recognizable. But my pieces are cut up so small that
Okay.
there's no visual of what it was.
I
I
understand.
don't know if you know what I'm saying.
I
No, that makes
completely
sense.
understand.
And
That's like in
I do
music.
think of it once in a while. But I think if they're if they're unrecognizable, then I'm not the only person doing collage. Frank, what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah, Frank.
Let's see.
Well, not about mine, but you know
But
people.
the idea that.
So, yeah, so I teach, I'm a high school art teacher, and I teach my kids about appropriation. So it essentially is borrowing other people's imagery, but also like infusing like their aesthetics, their flavor into their collages.
Oh, absolutely.
So I do collages too, but there's a borderline as far as like taking someone's image and just changing the color of it. It's really about trying to fit into the composition of whatever you're working.
Right, but taking an image and then taking another image and creating a different aesthetic.
And to learn technique, but see, if someone wants me to tell them exactly how I do this, I don't wanna do that, because this is mine. And as a teacher, it's been very, very important to me to make sure that even young kids have the opportunity to do their own thing within a realm, like say the realm of some color theory or something, or you know, I don't even have to go there, I think you know what I mean. But maybe I was lucky I didn't have art until I got to college. I don't know. My mom and dad were very open to me doing things. My dad had a grocery store, and uncle. There was lots of paper, there were boxes. I worked in a store, but we did movies, the family got together, we played music, and you know, so I think some of it, if families are lucky, comes from families. And then when they go to school, hopefully the learning experiences expand and make it even better, because people, like, this is an example. On Facebook it came up with artist friends about color, and I said, do any of you know any color, I'm having a hard time remembering this, color schemes. Well, they thought I meant going to the local hardware store somewhere and getting paint samples and picking out colors to go together. I didn't mean that at all. I meant triad. You know, I mean, we taught even the little kids about color. Warm colors, cool colors was easy, you know, but then we got into the tertiary colors and all that. And so the lessons we were doing also involved that type of thing, you know, learning about that and knowing what the color wheel was. and of course not every color is on the color wheel, but it's a good place to start. And I love color because color is joyful, and even in sad times, the colors can bring us out of something. And I just need color, as you can tell.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited about the piece Cooper and I did together. Although I had worked on it first, and he was helping me with my garden and stuff, and I looked up and I said to him, you know, I've been thinking about working more on this piece, but would you like to work on it? And he took it to Chicago, and he was dog sitting and spent hours and hours and hours and hours on that piece. And now I have another piece ready for him if he has time to work on it. That one's going into the duet show at SBA starting the end of the month. So my love still is encouraging everybody to be the artist they can be if they want to be. You know, I mean, everybody can do something, whether it's appreciating art or talking about art or whatever. And do you know this guy?
No, who is he?
Tim? And he's also an artist.
Sure.
So Kay, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to be a woman artist in the, 50s, 60s, 70s, both in terms of, did you feel you were taken seriously as a woman artist?
Well, I came from a very small town. My dad and uncle in the store and my mom never ever made me feel like I wasn't as good as a guy. And so whatever things I did, I was just treated equally. So when I went to UW-Madison, there were a couple things that happened. Not bad, but definitely biased. one I'm not even gonna tell you. Oh, it wasn't to me. Well, I'll tell you. I was in a life drawing class, and the professor was really, really, really good. But I'd never been in a life drawing class, and that was fine. I took it, and we did drawings and nudes all afternoon. Well, the professor came around to one young woman, and he said, well, you don't have any breasts, so you wouldn't know how to draw breasts. And I'm thinking, yeah, what am I getting into here? And there were a couple other instances, not quite as obvious, but I guess I want to end with one story. And maybe it's not the answer to your question. But that picture of the mullein weed in the walnut frame, the tall one in this room, I was at UW-Madison, and at lunchtime I was going to the dorm to eat lunch, and I saw this big mullein weed, and I decided that that I would stop and sketch it. I must have had a pencil. And as I was kind of squatted there drawing this big thing, someone said to me, what are you doing? And I looked up, and here it was an African dress. Well, I assumed he was African, or maybe not, but he was dressed in all of his full regalia, beautiful, clothing. And I said, well, this is a mullein weed, and I really like them because we used to have them where we lived. And so we talked a little bit, and then I went and quick had lunch, and then I went back. Well, Santos Zingali was a great teacher, but he made some of the students in the summer feel really awkward because they were classroom teachers and hadn't had art. And so he was saying to one person, don't you even know how to put paint on a palette? Well, I knew how to paint, but it made me nervous too. So rather than wait till the next day and go back and start a painting with him, lording over us, and he was a really good teacher, but I went, and it came so fast because it was so strong, and that's oil on board. And he was just so shocked that I could do that, So I've had so many unique experiences, and I guess I'm a little bit feisty, in case you haven't noticed. But my mom and dad never treated, in our family, we didn't feel any bias between brothers and sisters or boys and girls or whatever. So I just wasn't used to it, and after getting over the initial nervousness of it, for fear he might yell at me, all he did was say, well, when did you do this? So I've got so many stories, but Madison was a good school, and the other really important thing, I was supposed to go on a 6-credit tour of Europe. That one summer I was there, or I was going there, and suddenly it fell through about Christmas time. And my friend, who was a women's Phi Ed teacher, said she lived upstairs, I lived downstairs with 3 other women teachers. She lived upstairs with 3 other women or teachers, and she said, well, I'll go with you. So we hopped on a plane, started in England, went to all the Scandinavian. How many loads of pieces did you take out of my house?
Was it maybe 10?
And
or more?
They tell me there are 62 pieces here, and some won't be here after today. The ones that are for sale will stay. The ones that I don't have for sale will be gone at some time.
Well, Kay, thank you for sharing your art with us, and also for everything that you've given Janesville and
Amen.
Sheboygan
I just know that everybody here really appreciates you.
Well, I appreciate you because I'm still a teacher. You know, I mean, I don't know if you ever get over being a teacher, especially if you believe in something. So my message to all artists is always to keep doing your own thing. Don't rely on always copying or always learning how somebody else did something totally. You know, that's fine, but you gotta be willing to go out on a limb and fail. I failed. Well, collage is a response to maybe failure. You know, I mean, what more could you do but take a piece and add something and play around with it and see what happens? I know my talking is wandering, but